That's the thing. Like when people see a 30-second clip or a 1-minute clip, it's part of a set, you know?
Yeah,
like people
yeah.
are like, why do you only talk about colors? Like, dude, I don't. This is part of like a half-hour show where I talked about heaps of other stuff. It's just the things that have gone viral have generally had to do with race or gender or religion, things that people really care about.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on stolen Yuggera and Turrbal lands, and as settlers of colour, we reflect upon the damaging legacy of colonisation. Always was, always will be.
My name is Sashi Perera. I am a stand-up comedian full-time as of 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go straight into the now. What just transitioned into full-time.
Yes.
I
Sorry, I started laughing. This is all brown people's reaction to full-time stand-up comedian. They're just like, what is the politest way that I can ask what the fuck?
I'm thinking of a quote from you from like as recently as like perhaps a year ago, where you were saying like your parents are kind of, they're okay with this idea of comedy, but if you were ever to do it full time, that would change.
Yeah.
How's their response been now?
Well, Dad passed away, so there's only one of them to deal with now. Bless him and love him. But I think it would have been a lot harder to justify if he was still alive. And I'm 37 years old. I should not feel that way.
Yeah.
But I do. I feel like, especially if you came here as a migrant, like the instructions were always, you know, have a safe job. And that was because our parents had to leave everything behind. So the one gift they gave us was stability. And then if you're the asshole that's leaving it behind, it better be for a really good reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure of that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have gone in with your writing, and on your Substack, you have gone into detail about your father passing away and some of the kind of logistical elements around there, and the admin. And I do notice these patterns of you share a lot of yourself. You keep sharing yourself, going into vulnerability. It's almost like you share and be vulnerable until it hurts. I don't know if it's something like the comedy angle in you, the comedy writer in you. What is that about? Like finding ways to kind of tackle these topics with that and keeping that comedy lens throughout.
I think I've always found it easier to write about stuff than talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Always. So I find it very easy to talk about subjects as long as there are punchlines involved. But so that's why stand up for me, if it's something that I've already processed, very easy to talk about.
Right.
But if it's something that's happening right now, I really don't like having in-depth conversations. Like I'm not a very touchy-feely person. I don't want to spend hours talking about our feelings. So the only way I can really express myself is through writing. And I think because of that, Substack has been really lovely, because I've learned that even if, for me, it feels like oversharing, but people seem to be responding to it, which is nice.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I think it's the only way I can express myself is through the writing. So writing about Dad's death was really helpful. Like it didn't feel like I have to do this. I think if ever you feel like this is something, you know, if it ever feels like you're forcing yourself to do it, you're probably not going to create good art.
Right.
It comes from a space of just like, it's the only way you know how to process something. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And writing has been, is it almost like a lifelong practice for you? Like you seem to have sort of been in a stride, like it's been really consistent for you for some time.
Super consistent. Oh my God, my diaries from when I was a teenager are so embarrassing. Like at least Taylor Swift found a way to like monetize those. But it's reading through some of that hurts. But I think because I've always only been able to express myself properly through writing, it's something that I've always done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And you have made that transition into full-time comedy, and perhaps a lifetime of writing has helped fuel that transition. But even as close as a year ago, it's kind of like, oh no, I'm not going to go full-time. Like what's tipped it over for you?
Had to. So I've written about this on Substack a bit, but we've had a lot of fertility issues. Like we had 4 miscarriages, 4 IVF transfers. So it was a lot of time in the hospital, a lot of medical appointments.
Yeah.
And my day job was incredibly good with leave. But what happened was basically I was at the hospital, then I do my day job, then I do my night job. I take leave to do stand-up stuff during the day sometimes, and then I take leave from the day job to do hospital stuff. And like that triangle was just getting unsustainable. And I was happy to do it as long as I was like, okay, but this will change. This is for a short period of time. But when it looked like, these fertility struggles are going to continue and the health appointments are going to continue, like something has to give. So it was like day job, night job, or health. And it had to be the day job. So I really was pushed into it. And not by them. They were lovely. They gave me heaps of leave because they were really understanding. But it was just got to the point where it was not sustainable. So I literally could not do it anymore. So I feel like Dad would understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have a bit of a process of like reckoning with that and like finding it on your own?
It's been a really long reckoning process. Like my husband, Charlie, he's been telling me to quit for ages because he's been like, you're pushing yourself way too hard for what the day job brings you.
Yeah.
You don't need it. Like, like you can go full pelt at this comedy thing. I feel like maybe if I was in my 20s, I'd be much more open to it. But like I'm 37, like we're at the pointy end of life. So it feels like it's not a time to be taking risks and things. But yeah.
Right. I feel like we're of a similar age and cultural background, but I just last night applied for my very first full-time job of my life.
Wow. So you're doing the flip?
Yeah.
So you've had a background in the arts the whole time?
Somewhat. Arts events, that sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Living, working with contracts and in some ways similar to yourself, like in different parts of the country and other countries overseas. But yeah, it's a interesting. We're sort of like crossing over here.
And what made you go full time after?
Oh, I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but I just applied for one.
Yes. Okay. Well, good luck.
So I'm like mentally sort of in that space. A bunch of my work is with festivals and events and that kind of thing, and I am just, I guess, not too dissimilar from the COVID time. I'm kind of looking at the festival apocalypse and a lot of things going down, a lot of venues shutting down.
Current apocalypse hopefully just means a reset and everything will be back in a couple of years, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hopefully. But just noticing with like a lot of arts organizations and artists that have been struggling, and I do notice that when I'm on like a multi-week project that I do respond to that kind of structure. And so I've been doing some casual work with the ABC, who are not very far away from here. So like the commute is close by.
Yeah.
And so it's not too unknown. It's not like a corporate weird sphere. It's like if it works out, it would be a sort of known entity. And I think that is probably good enough for me for like doing it on my own terms sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not necessarily like a death to these sort of activities or my business. I feel like with that kind of stability and structure and regular income that I'll be able to like support the business and employ people and that sort of thing.
I think that this whole thing of you have to go at something 100% is a fallacy, and it's actually not doable in the current environment of, living. I know most stand-up comedians have another job on the side. You need it. And the only reason I don't have to have one for the moment is because I had a very stable job for 5 years, and I did too at the same time, which means I've banked enough now to try for a year. Okay, what does this look like?
Right.
But I have a friend who's a musician, and he's been a musician since we graduated high school. Like I knew him in high school.
Okay.
He's a muso, then he moved into sound engineering. He's been in the arts his whole life.
Right.
And now he's like, things are getting bleak in the arts industry. I think I might have to take a full-time job.
Okay.
And he's like, I was like, but you have done this for so long, 100%. It's totally fine if you have to do a full-time job for a while, maybe forever. You've logged your hours as a muso.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but I totally judged everyone else. And so I feel like a lot of that in the arts is like, oh, but we judged all you full-time office people for ages. I remember him in my 20s being like, oh, Sashi, I could never do a full-time job. You know, I'm just not suited for the office environment. And I was like, no one is born wanting to work in an office. Please. Are you joking?
Yeah.
No one is in their cot being like, I can't wait to get to a keyboard. You know, like
Yeah.
you do it because you need money.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. And if you love your job, like, wow, what a absolute bonus. So yeah, I think you can be bits of everything. And you can be everything sometimes and nothing at other times. And all of that is okay. Like life, if you're lucky, life is so long. They say life is short.
Yeah.
But it's actually so long.
Right. Yeah, especially because I think something that I share with you is that that sort of need or desire just to do too many things all the time.
Yes. Yeah. That seems to be quite a thing in the art sector in general.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because it's a certain type of personality or it's the environment where you kind of have to do a bunch of things, right? You can't just do one thing to bring in the income. Even as a stand-up, it's like you do the shows, but you also, oh my God, the comedy admin is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all in there, despite, you know, having some support for touring and that sort of thing. I imagine the comedy admin is all in-house, so to
There's
speak.
so much stuff. Yeah. I'm answering emails for like a large part of my day being like, this isn't fun. This isn't fun at all.
Right.
But yeah, it's all just a necessary part of the process, I guess. Yeah.
So that the 5 years in a stable job has helped you prepare for this moment. Is it 6 years in comedy now?
Yeah, 5 years in comedy. So started the same year that
Okay.
I moved to Melbourne.
Okay.
And got into the public service. And honestly, the beauty of a 9-to-5 job, just the stability of like a paycheck coming in 2 weeks' time is like, it was amazing, unheard of for me. In my 20s, I jumped around a lot to different contracts. And I enjoyed it. It was exciting, but I also didn't thrive in the uncertainty of it all. And now I'm back to the uncertainty. So let's see how we go. Yeah.
Right. And so 5 years of doing that, but I would say in the last year or perhaps 2 years, there's been a shift for you. And my sort of, the way I've been understanding this and other similar pathways has been this idea of like a halo effect. It's like here was an artist doing their thing, continue to do their thing, and then almost suddenly, in a way, there is like more of a sort of shine around their thing.
That's such a nice way to explain it.
Right.
I'm the angel of comedy. Wow.
The comedy angel has come to save us.
I have come.
From all the men and brown men that have been dominating the scene.
No, that's such a kind way to put it. But yeah, I think that's why it's so weird because I've been doing it for 5 years. For the first 2 years, you're getting paid in like beer tokens, which is great. But also I had a job to go to the next day. So you never make the most of it.
Yeah.
And suddenly one of your reels goes viral and then another one and another one. And that was in Jan last year. Like I remember it took me like 5 years to get to 1,000 followers and I cracked 1,000 and I was like, oh my God, I'm legit now. I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
And then I went from 1,000 to 100,000 in 3 months. Like,
wow.
That was crazy, unheard of. And then started hearing from people all around the world. And it was just so exciting to have what you're joking about resonate with so many people around the world. I've just really been enjoying it. And it brings all these cool people into your life. Like I would have never met you. I would have never met Anissa Nandala. Like, you know, just awesome people doing awesome things all around the country.
And Anissa Nandala is another great example of an incredibly talented comedian from a perhaps underrepresented background who's just leveraged video incredibly well.
So good. I actually was watching her reels before I started.
Okay.
Her reels and Vidura BRs who I've never met.
Right.
And they were just smashing it on the reels and it was just inspiring. I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I can do this too just to get a few more people through to my comedy festival show. And it just took off.
And is that what you had in mind by filming it? I know you've talked about like, just put up a few posts because I want to get a few people. Was that sort of like you'd thought about it, that potential pathway?
No, so all of the reels that I initially shared
Yeah.
in that 3-month period,
Yeah.
one was from a 7-minute spot that I'd done my first comedy festival with a show called Breast of the Fest.
Yeah.
And then me and a friend did a split bill, so like 30 minutes each at Good Ghouls. And we just filmed it just to have a record of it.
Right.
And then after watching Anissa and after watching Vidura, I was like, oh yeah, I could probably cut up a few of these reels.
Huh.
The end. Crazy. From 37 minutes of video, it was 100,000 followers. Wild.
And you're doing this yourself on your phone?
Yeah.
Taking the raw footage and...
Yeah. I've gotten better at it. Initially, it was on TikTok's platform was amazing for editing. And then I had screen recorded and then shared it on Instagram because they hate that watermark.
Yeah, okay.
Hate it.
Right.
And then someone told me about CapCut and it's way better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that's also TikTok's editing software.
You just have to remember to delete that last clip every time.
Yes, every time. But yeah, so because so Charlie and I are massive travel video nerds, so we spend hours editing videos that no one watched about video, like travel videos from like when we were younger. Both of us share that, so both of us find editing very easy because people are like, "Oh, it's so finicky. How do you do it?" Like, I don't know, man. Be a loser in your 20s. You figure it out.
So good.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was like getting those hours in. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Stay home on a Friday night to edit. Do that.
Nice.
So, yeah, I think it's just been a really lucky thing where you already had some of the skills that I needed to promote, because I know that people who have been doing stand-up for a really long time, I think it's pretty frustrating for them because they've built up this incredible base over years from like touring, and now it's like, are you joking? I have to like share this stuff on the internet? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. That's just how it is at the moment. Yeah.
And Vidra and Anissa are two really nice examples that both sort of do their own sort of mold breaking thing with video. I think I noticed with Vidra that he'd clipped the entire show. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just fed little bits of it.
Yeah.
And it was just clever because it's like, okay, if I go see this guy, this is what I'm getting. And also with everyone's attention spans at the moment, there's so many people who are just like, oh, Sashi, you're getting a Netflix special. You get a Netflix special. It's just like
it's
what
a given
happens
pathway.
after? Yeah, but also like even if it is the pathway, like what happens next? Like we're such fickle consumers now that like, you know, like the stuff on Netflix, not the stand-up specials, but some of those TV shows probably take years to make.
Right.
You binge it in a week and you're like, next.
Yeah.
You know, like it's all very quick.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's hard to kind of convey that the effort and the teams and the whole backstory that goes
People
into this.
don't care.
They don't care.
They were like, oh, sorry, this writer had this idea for decades, wrote it down, made a TV show, 3 years in development, just shooting money. I watched it in a week.
Right.
And then I wanted to the next thing.
Yeah. It's like that is the pace, isn't it? And in Anissa's case, I've clocked this, what seems to me to be quite unusual, of pumping out your current material and still playing that. And I've watched that material play in spaces and it still works because the people in that room are not necessarily the ones that have seen the material. That was like, wow.
It's really hard to know what jokes are okay to repeat and what jokes you need to not say anymore because people are sick of them.
Yeah.
And I seem to be constantly making the wrong choice. I've had people, because there are now, like, you know, the hair tie joke where I say that's my hair tie.
Yeah.
I took that out of this show because I was like, everyone is sick of that. You know, like that has really done the rounds. And then 2 ladies at 2 separate shows came up to me after and was like, we didn't see you do the hair tie joke.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it's hard. You're like, oh, is it like a muso playing their greatest hits?
Yeah.
Or is it something new and fresh? Like it's really hard to know. I'm trying to get the balance right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was observing some of that with Leslie Liao's show last weekend.
Oh, she was here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think because I feel like I've seen the short clips. Is it a full-length Netflix special or is she part of a
I think she's done the
montage?
Netflix.
I think it's a full-length.
Yeah.
And then, so I think I only recognized like a couple of bits, including the ending piece that was recycled, but everything else was
New.
was quite new. what are the functional things that changed about that the halo effect, the sort of the awareness of your content? What functionally were you able to do? Like when those numbers move, what else comes along with it?
I think just opportunities. Suddenly there's a whole bunch of different people getting in touch and they just slide into your DMs
Yeah.
about like, hey, we've got this casting call. Hey, we've got this writer's room. Hey, we'd like you to come here. This lady flew me to Rome to perform at her wedding. That was the maddest thing that happened. And, like sometimes you're on the plane on the way to Rome just being like, what happened? This
Right.
is all a bit wild. But this is why I always encourage people to share their content. I'm like, I know it sucks, like especially when you're starting and there's like 200 views on each video, and especially when you're like, this is a good joke, this is going to do better.
Yeah.
Oh man, are you humbled? And it doesn't change across platforms either. Like even when the content was taking off on Instagram and on Facebook and on TikTok, it was not moving on YouTube. Like so you just never know how it's all going to work. But I think it allows you to reach your audience, because even if you have trolls come in, even if you have people who tell you you're doing a terrible job, there are so many other people that find you, and that's the only way you're going to get eyeballs on it. Like those two shows, I don't know how many people came to Breast of the Fest, but the Good Ghouls show, which is that split show I was talking about, 130 people came to see it. The end. Like that's all. So those jokes would have just died because I would have been like, well, I've already done them. And in sharing them and getting more views on them, it got in front of so many more people.
Right.
So I think in terms of if you want to go further with what you're doing, if you put it online, the chances of someone seeing it is just higher. Yeah. Rather than at a festival when you're competing with like 500 shows or something.
Right. So having that.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
I feel like you asked a question and I talked about many other things.
I think it gave me a sense of like.
You're like, you got the vibe, maybe.
Got the vibe.
You're in the ballpark.
Like, these are like waypoints. It's not an exam. I like where the questions bring us to, and in this case, I'm thinking of having that editing, nerding out in your 20s with travel videos and editing. Having that background was definitely an asset here. But as you shoot your current show and produce more video, is there other things that you're learning about, like the production side, that necessarily help, or is it very content dominated, or is it both?
Yeah, it's super interesting because now Charlie is coming. And so I joined the Kidgel Entertainment Group at the end of last year. And Luke Kidgel is probably one of Australia's most successful touring comedians, but he's not done that many TV spots. He's not done that many radio spots. He just tours his butt off. And so he started this company with his brother, Jack, who's an accountant.
Yeah.
And one of their main things is like record as much as you can.
Yeah.
So I'm learning a lot about recording. Charlie's learning a lot about recording, because if Keg are the Kidgel Entertainment Group, so if Keg are around, they have the pros who like record stuff for you. But when we go to the UK and when we go to Amsterdam, Scotland, they're not going to be there. So Charlie and I've had to be like, I don't know, man, can we just use our phones? Are you sure? Because we don't understand the difference in quality that is required to shoot these shows. It's very different to what I used to do with travel, which is just point and shoot at a pretty scene. You got to get the sound, you got to get the picture, you got to get the light, you got to get the audience.
Yeah.
So definitely learning a lot about the actual shooting of things and how expensive everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean you're starting to acquire some equipment?
We have bought some equipment now, but only as of like a week ago. So I'll report back on that.
Okay.
Because basically Reese, who's one of the main camera guys, and he's amazing, was like, this is the stuff. And my ethnic genes were like, no.
Take those figures away from me.
I can't. Please get that away from me. I just operate with a JVC, $800, baby. That's all I'm doing. And he was like, that's just not, like what you need in terms of light and sound is completely different. So we've tried to come to a compromise on that. Yeah.
Okay, right. Because the touring, I mean, initially, Keg and yourself worked out this tour around the previous context of having a full-time job but stretching it out
Yeah,
over quite some time.
it was also only supposed to be around Australia. That was all. So they have all the equipment,
Yeah.
so that comes around with you, which is very easy. But then we wanted to go to London again, just because I was there last year and it went really well. So we wanted to test the market there. And like London has just gone bananas. It's awesome. Like it's just like the 400-seater there sold out.
Yeah, was it 4 shows in a row
Yeah.
that you've
So
sold?
now 4 shows in a row. And now we're going to Manchester, Birmingham. Like, so it's kind of turned into like a little bit of an EU tour, which is funny because other people in the EU where I'm not going are like, how come you're not coming here? It's like, well, I wasn't supposed to be anywhere, actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
But yeah, that's why I just really like working with them, because they kind of test the market, look at the data, and then see where to go next. And they're kind of really open to what you want to do, as opposed to being like, well, this is what Luke's doing and this is what Blake's doing. Blake's another one who's with Keg.
Right.
Instead of being like, well, that's what they're doing and that's what you should be doing. They're just kind of like, okay, what do you want to do? Which is really nice, because I want to go do a bunch of shows in like Sri Lanka next year.
Yeah.
India. I met so many Indian comics when they were down for Comedy Festival, and I think that's a market. There's 1 billion people there, and stand-up is exploding.
It's huge.
It is massive.
Yeah.
So I really want to go over there and do some shows, and they're really open to all that, which I'm just so excited.
Have you seen that Comic Stan show?
No.
Over there? It's kind of like if you, I know you've come up through raw comedy. It's kind of like if you imagine raw comedy mixed with like The Voice or something. But it's done in
What?
yeah.
What's it called? Comic Stan. Oh my
Comic
God,
Stan.
I'll put that in my phone.
And there's a I think the main one is English, slight Hindi focused, but I think they've also started up a one in the south that's all Tamil language focused. And it was one of these only sort of like contest shows that I was like invested in.
Yeah.
And it was like it was a real fun and journey, and there was a lot of like coloring of like different language and slang that was all woven through it, which felt really nice.
I think the working in different languages is just so impressive. In Sri Lanka, I had an opener, Diva, who there was another one, Tanya, as well. They were both amazing. So Tanya was Sinhalese and English, both. And because my Sinhalese is like that of a 7-year-old, I could only understand half the stuff. And then Diva was in 3 languages. He was across English, Tamil, and Sinhalese. And I was just watching him operate, being like, this is phenomenal. I can't do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And it plays quite well, right? Like
So cool.
Yeah.
Like, how do you learn to be funny in 3 languages? Like, learning timing and punchlines of 1 language is hard. 3 would be really hard. And then 3 at the same time, man.
just mind blowing.
Impressive. So impressive.
You've written a bit about your time in Sri Lanka, and your professional background in law probably had you placed quite strongly for navigating this space of where the line is, or where the cultural and legal lines are there. Can you tell me a bit about that experience this time?
It was from my aunt, really, like my whole family, extended family were like, don't perform in Sri Lanka. You don't know when to hold your tongue at the best of times. I'm like known in the family for like always putting my foot in it. I always say the wrong thing. And I was like, guys, you don't understand. I actually think a lot about comedy, so I think I'll be okay. Also, I'm 37 now. Can we cut me some slack? Rude. But it is quite serious in that there was a female stand-up comedian who went to jail last year, Natasha Edurisuria, who I actually met while I was over there. She was amazing.
Wow.
And she went to jail for, I think it was like 39 days, and then got out on bail and is still awaiting her hearing. So, and that was because she was basically an open micer. She was doing her first year in comedy. So it's not like she was a pro. It's not like she was pushing the boundary on purpose. She made some comments about the Buddha, which I actually, not going to say anything on record, but yeah. and yeah, went to jail. So I was just super aware of that. I also think when you're a woman, the things that you say are twice as offensive.
Right.
So I took out anything that was related to sex, religion, or politics from my jokes. And I was like, what's left? But it went well. And honestly, I was more worried about that show in front of 50 people than I have been worried for any show here.
Wow.
Just because it's your home, you know, it'll never stop being your home. It is so weird that it'll never stop being your home. I have never lived there. I was born there, but I left when I was 1.
Yeah.
I've lived here since I was 12, but still when I go back, it feels like home. And I don't know when that feeling goes away or if it ever will go away. But because of that, I was like, oh my God, if I fail here, I am done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I was very careful about the content, and it was probably way more censored than any other show I've done. But I was saying this to Charlie, like I'd much rather be able to do a censored show than no show at all. And that's how I still feel. So I want to go back and do like a much bigger set of shows over there as well. Yeah.
So when you're on tour, it's a party of two. It's yourself and Charlie, and I think you've covered just like what a sort of like rock of support a partner like that is, and plays how he plays that role. What is it about like having like a number one cheerleader like right beside you like that? Like how important is that?
It's really freaking lovely. Like it, honestly, I feel really, really lucky.
Yeah.
And I actually, before I signed with Keg, we very briefly talked about him just managing me, because I was like, oh, what if like we did this together and you were my full-time manager and like you would handle everything. And he was like, you are a nightmare. Number one. And number two, you never listen to anything I say. Because his specialty is marketing. Like he's a marketing consultant.
All right.
But everything he has told me, I have just blatantly ignored.
Yeah.
in this whole thing. So he was like, I can't. But now I have this management company and they do pretty much everything. And he just comes on tour. So he's there in terms of like he does the cameras and the merch and like helps like keep me sane. And I think being able to do it together has meant that I just think tour would be a bit more lonely otherwise. A lot of the time you don't really get to hang out, like especially if you're in places only for a couple of nights.
Yeah.
So, you get to the apartment, you stay there, you go do the show, meet a whole bunch of people, and then you go back to the apartment and you're alone. It's weird. So I think being able to do it with either my manager Alice or Charlie, it just means that like it's so much more fun to share it. And especially because he's in the show, you'll see tomorrow, because he's in the show, I think people get really excited to see him after. Like they're like, oh my God, is that Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think he finds it interesting as well because his specialty is marketing, to see what's happening and what works and what doesn't work.
Okay.
And yeah, he says like a lot of what seems to be happening has just been just genuine authenticity. And I think that's why when he gives me advice, it's like from an official marketing perspective. And I'll just be like, I don't want to do that. That sounds dumb. Yeah. Yeah, especially with Substack stuff where I put a lot of myself into it.
Yeah.
He's like, are you ready to talk about this? And I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've already clicked upload.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's been an interesting thing. I always check whether he's okay with the jokes, because I think that's a hard line of, like I give him a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And he has no right of response in that. So I think it would be very unfair to make jokes at his expense without his approval.
Yeah.
But so anything he's not ready to talk about or for me to joke about is off the table.
Yeah.
But generally, honestly, he's a really good sport. So is my mum. She's in a lot of the content as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels really good. Also, life wasn't always like this, like I met him when I was 31 on Bumble. So I just feel really lucky. Yeah.
Okay. I want to rewind a little bit towards some of your origins, or your main origin story, I guess. You talked about not coming to Australia until age 12.
12, yeah.
And I sent my parents to your show
Yeah, that was so
in Adelaide,
lovely.
and they had me in Dubai, and we're based in the Middle East or dad at least in particular was based in the Middle East for 10 years.
Oh, you were in Dubai.
Yeah,
Me
and so
too.
you
Age 6 to 12.
okay, just 3.5 weeks for me. Yeah,
Whoa, cool.
yeah. Uh, Dubai is uh, I've only spent like a couple of weeks there as a tiny baby, and then a couple of weeks there as an adolescent. Uh, it's an odd place to many people. What is it to you?
I would love to go back.
Yeah.
I feel like Dubai is like the sexy, I don't know. What would you describe? If Dubai was a person, they'd be like a sexy bachelor, And it was definitely not when I was a kid.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think it hadn't really hit its peak yet, but it was still a great time to be an expat there and, with no tax and all of that. I also think the Middle East is one of the main routes out of Sri Lanka for a lot of
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
And it was certainly that for my dad. So we lived there for 6 years and I don't really remember that much. I remember our school, I remember our tiny apartment, and I remember like parents being really happy. The only reason that we left was for education, I think, because a lot of kids, if you're in international schools over there for university, you have to go overseas. And I think my parents really wanted us to be with them during university. So I think Dad applied to the States, to Canada, to New Zealand, and to Australia. And Australia was the first one that came through. Yeah. Story of a migrant, hey? Just rolled the dice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywhere that'll
Where
give
am
me
I
a PR.
Where is
Yeah.
my life
Yeah,
going
just
next?
spin the globe and see where you can transfer to. So yeah, I made some really good friends, but I was 6. They've grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the period between 6 and 12, where did that take you?
6 and 12 was Dubai.
6 and 12 was Dubai, and
Yeah.
Sri Lanka was prior.
And then Oman was 1 to 6. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my dad was also in Oman. Yeah.
See, it's such I like, especially with a lot of migrants who are here,
Yeah.
I've realized that it's such a well-trodden pathway. Yeah, because it's one of the first ones out of Sri Lanka. Yeah.
It's like that middle ground. It's like, how do you get into the Western dollars world? Oh, the tax-free Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you,
income.
tax-free Middle East. Yeah.
Right. And Perth was the point of growing up here, was it?
Yeah, so we went to Sydney. My dad had some friends in Sydney, so we stayed with them, but it was too busy for him, which is ridiculous when I think about it, because I'm like, we came from Dubai. It was
Right.
so loud, lots of cars.
Yeah.
But yeah, he thought Perth, he got to Perth and was like, yep, here. And I think the really weird thing is because we always went back to Sri Lanka as often as we could. Like we didn't go on holidays to other places generally. My idea of Australia was Perth. So I think it's only since I moved to Melbourne that I've been, like I've now been to Tassie and I've now been to here. This is my first time in Brisbane.
Right.
And I'm like walking around looking at your houses and you're like, this is so Brisbane, the houses on stilts.
Right.
It's so cool. Like I feel like I'm just discovering more and more about this country that I love.
Right. And did you have any creative characters in the family to kind of model any of this from? Was there?
Honestly, both my parents are really funny. My mum I've noticed that she's actually wickedly funny in Sinhalese.
Okay.
But I think when she translated to English, it doesn't quite hit.
Right.
But in Sinhalese, she's very funny. And my dad was like life of the party, sometimes annoyingly so. But yeah, always really funny, very good storyteller. So I think the ingredients were always there. They were just never channeled towards stand-up comedy because like who even knew this could be a career, especially if you're from Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Right. Your writing and a lot of your comedy goes into racism and often casual racism, which as we experience in our professional lives in various aspects of our lives. How are you navigating that space at the moment? Is it something that you're kind of through writing and making content about it? Does that feel like you can like reclaim some of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've tried to water it down as much as possible.
Okay.
Like, I don't think I've said the word racism once in my comedy.
Right.
I've just tried to paint it as, hey, these are weird things that happen. Like that hair tie joke.
Yeah.
There's like 2,000 comments on there, like over 500,000 likes. And because I was looking at it the other day, and just the number of stories that resonated where, you know, I've been mistaken for the Uber driver, or I've been mistaken for the prisoner, or I've been mistaken as XYZ. It's just nice to talk about it in a way that instead of it getting immediately shut down, because there's no chill way, there's no relaxed way to talk about racism. Everything's so charged the second that word comes out, where instead in comedy, if you're just kind of like, here's something weird that happened, go home and think about it.
Yeah.
I'm finding it just freeing to have a space where I can even talk about that, and even brown stuff, white stuff, this thing where people are like, why are you obsessed with color? I'm like, because it matters. It still matters. I'm hoping for a day where it doesn't matter. And perhaps that's in the future at some point. But until we get there, there's no point pretending it doesn't exist. That seems a very useless way to operate.
Right. I'm aware that in some early stages of your comedy, it was perhaps something that you were almost like wanted to avoid. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first started, I didn't want to talk about being a woman. I didn't want to talk about being brown. You know, I just wanted to be like, I'm going to talk about self-serve checkouts and doors and crows, you know, things that everyone can relate to.
Yeah.
And I still do to some extent, and it's fun. But I've found the stuff that has most resonated with audiences has been when it comes from a very personal space, where as in like, it has to be specific to you for it to relate to someone else. Because if you're only talking about doors and self-serve checkouts, like it's still going to be funny, but is it going to be in a way that really resonates with someone because they're like, oh, that happened to me? I don't know. Maybe. Still finding out.
Do you remember perhaps some of the first instances when you did choose to start covering, like, I don't know, maybe your first set where you had there was like a racial tone in it or something like that?
Yeah, I think the weird thing is I just started telling stories about things that were happening to me.
Yeah.
And it was part of a set. That's the thing. Like when people see a 30-second clip or a 1-minute clip, it's part of a set, you know?
Yeah,
like people are like, why do you only talk about colors? Like, dude, I don't. This is part of like a half-hour show where I talked about heaps of other stuff. It's just the things that have gone viral have generally had to do with race or gender or religion, things that people really care about and things that people grapple with every day. But no, I don't think there was a specific moment. I do think the way I write now, I don't try to be deliberately inflammatory, but I try not to stop myself from kind of censoring myself where I'm like, oh, that's a bit too brown. That's a bit too womany. I just kind of give myself the freedom to be like, okay, where's this joke going to go?
Right. I almost feel like it's like, for me, it's like almost like a former life now. It's like it's about 5 years since I stopped touring this little, can't call it little really, like it was a hip hop comedy show and my life.
Oh, what? That's so cool.
My life was I sort of threw my life on the road in order to be able to tour it, and there was this tune that dived right into casual racism, and it was similarly like not in the line of what I was otherwise writing about. It was like more humorous things about riding a bike on a highway or like hitchhiking or those sort of like less non-confronting topics. And then I was in this headspace of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write this like a stand-up, not like a slam poetry sort of thing. I'm gonna put all these like angsty kind of things in it.
Yeah.
But also have like impressions of people that said strange things to me, and the tune was titled FAQ, and it would start with a premise of different things that were said to me. And I just remember the fear of performing, because it was also, I think the first times I did it were in Alice Springs, and some of the fear in me at the time was like, am I going to leave this pub on a stretcher? What is going to happen here? And then,
And what happened? How was it
well,
received?
I mean, I got into it and like all this sort of like seriousness and heaviness that I'd projected onto it kind of dissipated when I got the first laughs. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, right. Okay. And then I think in a similar way, I came to understand that comedy does have a nice way of like softening it, but then like having it in there so that maybe someone will go, oh, what were they talking about? And like maybe there's initially like a warm and comic reception to something, but I guess hopefully it sort of spurs these conversations and these thoughts.
I think it's just sowing those seeds. And it's also the thing of like, this affects everyone. Like, what I find a bit rich about our community is that we all left the country of birth or our parents'
Yeah.
births because everyone couldn't get on. And it could be like for reasons of race or religion. Like a lot of people migrated out of certain countries. I mean, yes, there is the economic meltdown as well, but my parents left during the Civil War. And coming here and expecting like perfect behavior from people, I find that very odd. So that's why like I like having the freedom to talk about racism, but not just racism in white communities. It's like
Right.
racism in all communities.
Okay.
Like the caste system is a thing in
Yeah.
India. The caste system is a thing in Sri Lanka, but to a much lesser extent. The entire civil war was Sinhalese versus Tamil. Like all of these things are still happening. And I think that, so I'm trying to find a way now to make us reflect on not just, you know, racism where we live, but also racism where we come from, or like bigotry where we come from. Like it's kind of wherever it is in your life, like just think about it.
That's so true. Like that you can have that sort of idealistic projection. It's like, oh, we're going to go to the West. They don't have these problems
No
over
problems there. And then, you know, you get here and you're just like, why are you making fun of me for being brown, man? It's like, because they're people here too, turns out.
there. Right,
Yeah.
right. When I was still doing that, the music touring.
Is that still online? Is that online anywhere?
I could send you some.
Oh,
There's some
yes.
relics. Yeah,
That's so cool.
But I think the way that it might show up again is hopefully through stand up, and so I think I am also trying to get that discipline and the writing practice going, and then I can bridge the two together. But then I see comics pop up. Have you seen Morgan J?
No, who's that? Everyone is on completely different comedy algorithms. This is what I'm learning.
Okay.
Because I will have so many people be like, oh, have you seen this person? And I'll be like, no, like we are all in our own comedy bubbles. I don't know
Right.
if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. He uses a lot of music. He's got a big background as a stand-up comic. Also, has been a musician, and I think maybe there's some acting in there as well. And the thing that he's sort of landed upon, and the thing that has, sort of jumped out there and gone viral from him is using a bit of music and using like a loop pedal with like an auto tune
Cool.
on it, and he's like, he even says himself, he's like, hey, I'm the hey, what's your name, bro, kind of guy, and he'll like hand the mic to someone and it'll be on auto tune, and they've got to like, my name is
That's
Dylan, and it'll go
awesome.
through the thing, and that's the thing that's been popping off, and he's coming and playing like 2 sold out Tivoli shows
Oh,
soon.
that's so fun.
Yeah, looking forward to that. But some of these things are kind of perhaps reminding me that like maybe the gap isn't as far as I thought it was, because I used to think that through having a music comedy set, I could play around with like bits of improv, speaking, talking comedy, but then it's like, oh, it's getting a bit weird now. Okay, and then here's the other tune that I prepared earlier, so I could always like fall back on that core of material. But perhaps that's not unlike how you might approach a stand-up set either.
But this is the thing, like it's like, are you a stand-up or are you a music comedian or are you an improv comedian?
Right.
And it's like, you can do whatever you want and the people who are into it will be into it and they'll follow you around. Like it's just kind of getting, I think when you're very clear about who you are, and that's what's getting clearer and clearer for me. I think it took me a while to find my voice, and now I know what I want to joke about, and now I know what I want to talk about. And I think I have that much more clear perspective. And maybe in 5 years, I'll be like, God, I was an idiot. I wish I hadn't put all of that online. But then you evolve, and that's a good thing too. So I don't think you have to choose. I think if you have fun doing it and you put a lot of thought into it, that's all that matters. Yeah. So do your hip hop, stand up, improv,
Oh, will damn it.
racism
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. I'm starting to get to the point where I've like told enough people that I'm going to do it. So like the collective accountability is out there. People are going to start coming back for me now. So
It's the thing. I think so much of it is just like you policing yourself. Like
Right.
before I put any of my stuff online, I honestly hesitated so many times because I thought like, who is going to care? It is such a saturated market. I'm probably shit anyway. Like, but you just got, I think the biggest step is just starting, because even if it seems like you're far behind everyone else, like if you just start, you are now ahead of everyone who didn't start. So it's just do it.
I love that because like in the last few years where I've sort of like taken my own artist hat on and I've been in, film and event spaces where I'm supporting a lot of other people who have their artist hats firmly on, and I would often be looking at them going like, oh, you're the number one enemy in the person in terms of what's standing in your way right now.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
thank you very much for that little bit of creative therapy, because you're just reflecting what I need to hear
Creative
just back
therapy.
to myself.
But also, like, I don't know if you've met a whole bunch of comedians, but we are some of the most anxious freaking humans around, just
Right.
walking around being like, oh, I'm so sorry for being here. Can I tell some jokes and then I'll go home? So
Right.
weird.
Right.
And we're all like that. So yeah, it took me just ages to learn to just, no one hates you. Everything's fine. Just do the gig, have a nice time, go home.
Right. There must be so much of like managing that with the kind of like, dying on stage so many times, and you've got to sit with yourself before and after those performances, right?
Yeah, and if you do die on stage, you do learn that, you don't actually die. You just have to ride some time through and go home and shake it off and get on stage again.
Therapy is something that comes up in your material a bit, and in fact is quite connected to the title of the current show, I guess. And the
Boundaries. Yeah.
I have recently, for the first time, connected with a therapist who is also from a culturally diverse background, and just my experience of that is so different. And
Yeah, interesting.
it's something that I've kind of like sought out, and previously I've gone to a medical institution that is focused on people from culturally diverse backgrounds, and then I ended up with a therapist where it's like, you're pretty white. I have to explain BIPOC to you. I think that
Oh no.
confirms it. So it's a funny little frontier of like just like navigating the whiteness of that space.
It's really weird. I also still can't get over this thing of like not wanting to talk to anyone brown because I don't wanting to get back to my mum, which I know
Right.
is like such a weird thing. And my mum knows everything anyway because I put it into my stand-up comedy shows. But it's this weird thing of I have struggled to find a good counselor. Like the one that I talk about is like white, and the ones that I've had since, I had a couple of sessions with a brown therapist, but it was online. It was hard to find, like even get into one in Australia here. So yeah, I don't know. And I guess so much of it is just whether they're good at their job and they can understand the problems that you're talking about. Because I think a large part of the issue is when they don't understand the inherent guilt that just comes with being South Asian. Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting sort of space. I sort of had to ask other people if I would be able to find someone from a cultural background, and some of
Yeah.
the initial responses were like, you should, but we don't know how to.
Yes, exactly. Like, how do we find them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had slam poets describe poetry to me as like saying the most with the the least amount of words possible. And I feel like some of that resonates with stand up, and particularly in your work. I'm thinking some of the starting premises of some of these skits that have done quite well, like my husband is white. For those that don't see color, I'm brown. There's another one that starts with I used to be a refugee lawyer, and in 3 different cases, the people were confusing me for the refugee and not the lawyer. Can you tell me a bit about like this writing process and like kind of sharpening those tools so that you can have these like super concise lines that hit like that?
Yeah, I actually was given great advice, all these tools by a friend. So she's who I did the split show Good Ghouls with, Rose Bishop. And she's just an excellent writer. And she would say, okay, first you speak it out. For me, I find it really difficult to write, to actually like sit and write through a joke. So for me, first I would speak it out. And honestly, when you're first trying to tell a story, like that 30-second joke would have started as like, oh, I was here and then I talked to this man and then it was day, it was rainy out actually. Like you're faffing a lot. And to work down that faff takes time. So first I would speak it out and then I would transcribe it. And then it was like, okay, how can you get from A to B with the least amount of words?
Right.
Yeah, in the quickest amount of time, because a lot of sets, especially club sets when you're starting out, they're 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend time faffing, you're only going to get one joke out.
Right.
It's not going to be worth it for the punchline unless it's a really, really good punchline. So for me, I learned how to build sets with 5 minutes, 3 jokes. So that's set up, punchline. So yeah, all of it's in the writing process, to be honest. Sometimes it gets really annoying to have to really do the transcribing and then be like, okay, I don't really need that word. This is what I could say. But yeah, it's all a really long process.
Right. Do you also think about an audience's ability to building investment in you? Like,
that's been a new thing for me, and it has really taken off this comedy festival where people are, especially and interstate, where after shows people want to take photos, they want to buy merch. Well, a lady asked me to sign her merch the other day.
Yeah.
And I'm like really happy to do all of it, but I'm still like, why? Yeah, it's this thing of I think because it all happened so quickly that I still feel like I'm living my normal life, but things have just gotten a bit weirder. And I also am desperately needy. So I just feel like I get to spend such short amounts of time with all these people who now know me so well.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Like I'm learning to understand that disparity is never going to go away.
Okay.
I'm not going to have time to get to know everyone.
Yeah.
So I think that's because I have to understand it's not a friendship, because in a friendship, someone cares about you and you care about them.
Yeah.
It's very mutual.
Yeah.
And if you don't take the time to get to know them, then you are a shit friend. And I'm understanding now, it's not a friendship, but I don't know what it is. Yeah. The relationship I'm in with all these really lovely people.
Right.
So yeah, it's weird. I'm still trying to figure out. But yeah, Charlie, because he's a lot more rational than I am, is like, hey, you just spent an hour with them, you spent an hour with them and they like what you're putting out there. They just want to say hi. They just want to take a photo, and that's all. That's all that's actually required of you. So yeah, that's been nice. I hope everyone's okay.
Right. Because that's the thing, right? When we transition between that gap of sharp, short little clips to the long form show. Like Vidra, you also have put out a video on demand show. So having not seen one of your live shows yet, I've sort of got a bit more of a sense of the kind of nuance and journey and the sensitivity that's kind of woven through a bigger show. Is that something that you're able to do more when you have that? It's not 5 minutes anymore. It's not been 5 minutes for a little while, but when you have a bit more time to stretch out and expand.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It means that you're not just delivering jokes and then getting off stage. You get to actually chat to the audience, you get to relax. But the whole point of the clips is to get you to the 1 hour show, for you to get a bit of an understanding of vibe. And because, you know, like especially in a cost of living crisis, it's like you're asking people to part with money and time.
Yeah.
So they want to know that it's going to be worth their while, especially if you don't have a TV show and you're not on the radio all the time. So yeah, I just enjoy it so much. I feel like I step on stage and time just flies by and it's time to get off again. Yeah.
Right. 2023 endings, 2024 boundaries. It's been big bounces and big expansion during this time. What is it for you that's on the horizon now? Where are you looking?
Horizon. So I think Endings was about the wedding that never happened 10 years ago. And I think the next show will be about kids. Like that's something that we're trying to work through at the moment.
Okay.
And I think like with big things that happen that, you know, everyone thinks about whether or not they want kids.
Yeah.
You know, this is an eternal question for so many people. And I really there are so many things that have happened in the last 3 years that are very sad, but also incredibly funny. Like where I've been like, I can't wait till I process this trauma so I can joke about it.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that the next show will be about kids.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I have my parents under very strict orders. They had been under very strict orders to not tell me anything about your show, and I'm going to be enjoying it freshly tomorrow.
After the pedal party. Are you rocking up in your bike gear?
I'm not sure what my bike gear will be. It might be a Santa suit, so I don't know if I want to rock up to a comedy show in a Santa suit. But I would like to thank you so much for coming on the pod today.
Thanks for having me on. You were my first, like, I feel like you were one of my first big backers, like cheerleaders when I went viral that I didn't know.
Right.
So it's just been so cool to get to know you and meet you for the first time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.